Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the EHAD Physiotherapists Committee Meet the Author interview series. I'm Paula Lucknan, a physiotherapist at Children's Health Ireland in Dublin, and your host for this session. Our special guest author for the session is Dr. Megan Kennedy. For discussion today will be Megan's recently published paper titled Physical Activity, Physical Fitness and Cardiometabolic Risk amongst adults with moderate and severe haemophilia. Firstly, Megan, I'd like to thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today and welcome to you. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners, please?
Thank you very much, Paula. And yes, so I'm a postdoctoral research fellow currently working in the discipline of physiotherapy in Trinity College in Dublin. And my PhD research involved a series of studies examining physical activity participation and various aspects of physical health amongst adults with moderate and severe haemophilia in Ireland. So I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to discuss this research with you today here, and thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome, and thank you again. Megan, I believe this was one of the papers published as part of the research undertaken for your PhD. Would you like to tell us about the rationale underpinning the research?
Yeah. So to start off, I think I could be here for a very long time if I was to name off all of the important benefits that regular physical activity can bring to our overall health. But for our physical health, we do know that physical activity is very important for our physical fitness, our aerobic fitness, our strength, our balance, our flexibility. And it's also very important for contributing to maintaining a healthy body composition. And importantly as well, regular physical activity is associated with a reduced risk of various cardiometabolic comorbidities, which many people may experience with increasing age. So for example, high blood pressure or type 2 diabetes, just to name off a few. And haemophilia, we know as a condition, can have a significant impact on a person's ability to be physically active or to exercise or to play sport. And various different factors may contribute to this depending on the person. So things like their bleeding phenotype, the extent of haemophilic arthropathy they may have, the pain and physical limitations associated with these issues. And then as well, certain comorbidities, particularly amongst older adults with haemophilia. There's also other factors surrounding access and adherence to treatment and other psychosocial factors as well. So, a lot of different things may impact physical activity for people with haemophilia, and it can be quite complex and multifactorial for the individual. So adding to that, then we do know that there's been a lot of advances in the medical treatments and comprehensive multidisciplinary care for people with haemophilia in recent decades. And this has contributed overall to an aging haemophilia population that we now see. So we're seeing people with haemophilia living for longer, potentially with comorbidities that are specifically associated with haemophilia, but also with comorbidities that are experienced in the general population. So when we consider all of this together, it's important that we now pay attention to the potential impact that haemophilia has on physical activity, physical fitness as well, and cardiometabolic risk factors within the context of the aging haemophilia population. So we collectively examined these parameters in 53 adults with moderate and severe haemophilia, so male adults, and we compared the outcomes between them and 33 male control participants of a similar age who did not have haemophilia in this study.
Okay, and would you like to run us through the main findings of the study?
Yeah, certainly. So to summarize the main findings of the study, first of all, a really important finding that we came to, and it was very positive to see that the majority of adult people with haemophilia in this study, so 73% of the 53, they actually achieved the minimum threshold of 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week, as per the recommended physical activity guidelines that we know of. But overall, they did appear to be less physically active in moderate and vigorous physical activity when compared to the control participants. So that was the first kind of point. To add on to that, when we looked at the physical activity data in a little bit more detail, we found that participants with haemophilia were more limited in 10-minute bouts of sustained higher intensity physical activity compared to control participants. And this is important because it sort of suggests that they may have potentially limited exercise tolerance. This was also reflected in our findings on physical fitness, when we found that adults with haemophilia performed less optimally compared to the control participants in the 6-minute walk test, grip strength test, and one leg stand balance test. So then the last kind of key important finding that I'll discuss is that there were significant rates of cardiometabolic risk factors amongst adults with haemophilia relative to those that we saw in the control population. So this included increased rates of abdominal adiposity by waist circumference indices. And we also found, as per the general BMI or body mass index, that there were more adults that were overweight or obese compared to control participants. And then another comorbidity that kind of stood out in people with haemophilia were higher rates of clinically diagnosed high blood pressure relative to that we saw in controls. So bringing all of these findings then together, we could suggest that limitations in physical activity, physical fitness, and various cardiometabolic risk factors in some people with haemophilia may collectively altogether influence the risk and severity of various chronic health issues amongst adults in the aging haemophilia population.
Okay, there's a lot to think about there, an awful lot. I suppose, what are your thoughts around the implications of your findings for clinicians and also for researchers who are planning physical activity or exercise interventions in people with haemophilia?
Yeah, so whilst physical activity and exercise interventions, they're certainly very important components of haemophilia treatment and management, as we all know, for various different things. And I think what the findings of this study do highlight to us is that potentially we may need to start to acknowledge in the older population the limitations of physical activity and exercise alone in addressing certain health issues, especially say if exercise tolerance is a problem for people for whatever reason that may be, whether it's due to pain, whether it's due to comorbidities. So I think it's important as well to remember that health benefits can be achieved even with smaller amounts of light intensity physical activity if an individual isn't able to reach the general guidance thresholds for moderate and vigorous physical activity. But additionally to that, there may be a need to now incorporate more holistic, multidisciplinary approaches in planning health interventions that involve physical activity and exercise in order to improve physical health outcomes in adults with haemophilia and hopefully potentially reduce chronic health risk within the aging haemophilia population. So for instance, this may involve specialist multidisciplinary input from medical, dietary, or psychology healthcare professionals who just to name a few examples of members from the MDT that could be involved in a health intervention. That's not exhaustive, but so just to kind of think about it in a more multidisciplinary, holistic perspective. And then lastly, in addition to that, I think it's important that we can determine and further explore barriers and facilitators to physical activity, exercise, and other health behaviours as well amongst adults with haemophilia in order to optimise the design of a health intervention. So overall, I believe now we do need further research into the optimal design, as well as the feasibility and effectiveness of personalised multidisciplinary health interventions for adults with haemophilia. And hopefully this will have a positive impact in promoting healthy ageing amongst the adult haemophilia population into the future.
That's great. Thank you very much, Megan. It's really helpful and really insightful. And I'd like to thank you for sharing your work. And I very much appreciate that you've joined us today.
Thank you very much, Paula.